I was standing in the driveway of the house my parents bought for my sister when I realized I was never going to be their real daughter. I cooked for them during chemo, took double shifts to pay their property taxes, sold my car to cover my sister's tuition once, and still, when they had the chance to give one of us a home, they handed her the keys and handed me silence. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that maybe my loyalty meant something. But when my mom said, "She needs it more, honey," "You're used to surviving," something snapped inside me. I smiled. Because the lottery ticket I'd bought as a small gesture, the one I never gave them, was about to hit. My name is Angela Monroe, and I live in Tennessee. I stood on the edge of the porch holding a casserole dish wrapped in foil, while the rest of the guests laughed inside the house I had never seen before. I'd driven 3 hours through rain to get there, thinking it was just a small gathering to celebrate my sister's promotion. That's what Mom had said when she called. Just family, honey. Nothing big. But as I stared at the decorative "Welcome Home" Ella banner and the champagne glasses clinking in the kitchen, something began to twist and splinter inside me. They bought her a house. Not rented. Not helped her with a deposit. Bought her a house. The words sat heavy in my gut like a swallowed stone. My parents, Ronald and Judith Monroe, the very people I had taken care of through 2 cancer scares, a car accident, and Dad's bankruptcy, had bought my younger sister a 3-bedroom, 2-bath cottage in the nicest part of Franklin, Tennessee. And they never told me. Never even hinted. I watched as Ella hugged our parents, all 3 of them beaming like this was a fairy tale. I stayed on the porch, my smile frozen and my fingers gripping the casserole like it was the only thing keeping me upright. No one noticed I hadn't walked in yet. No one came to the door. I'd given up years of my life to hold this family together. I was the one who skipped college to work full-time when Dad's business failed. I was the one who paid Mom's medical bills when her insurance lapsed. When Ella called crying from college because her loan hadn't come through, I sold my car so she wouldn't have to drop out. They said she was the fragile one, the dreamer. I was the reliable one, the one who would understand. That word "understand" had become a knife I didn't even notice anymore. I finally walked inside. My heels clicked on the polished hardwood floors that still smelled like fresh varnish. The kitchen was filled with catered food, and someone handed me a glass of wine like I belonged. But I didn't feel like I belonged. I smiled through it. I hugged Ella, told her the house was beautiful, even as my chest burned and my eyes stung. Then I slipped away into the laundry room where I could breathe. I pulled the little red envelope from my purse, the one with the lottery ticket I'd bought earlier that week. I tucked it in as a silly gesture, just something extra to give to my parents. "Maybe this will be your lucky day," I was going to say. But I stood there, fingers tightening on the envelope, heart pounding, and I changed my mind. They had never needed luck. They'd had me, and I had nothing. I quietly took the envelope out of the gift bag and slid it back into my purse. No one saw. No one noticed. I walked back out, handed them the gift, a custom calendar with family photos, and they smiled, barely glancing at it before placing it on the table. Later, as we posed for pictures in front of the fireplace, Mom wrapped her arm around Ella and said, "She needs this stability, honey. You're strong. You've always survived." I smiled for the camera, but inside, something in me cracked so deep it might never be whole again. That was the moment. That exact blinding moment where I knew I refused to be trampled on any longer. I said my goodbyes. I kissed their cheeks. I walked back to my old secondhand Toyota in the dark, my heels echoing against the pavement. No one followed. No one asked if I got home safe. And when I pulled into my 1-bedroom rental that night, I didn't cry. I opened my purse, took out the envelope, held the lottery ticket in my hand. I stared at it for a long time, and then I whispered, "This was supposed to be yours. But now, it's mine." Growing up, I was never the problem child. And that was the problem. While Ella snuck out, failed math, dyed her hair neon pink, and still got a "she's just finding herself" from my parents, I was the one who swept up the pieces. Quietly, invisibly. I did what was asked of me, and then did what wasn't. I never argued. I never cried too loud. I never got in trouble because someone always needed something, and I was always the one who had to deliver. They said I was strong, but what they really meant was I didn't need love the way Ella did. When I was 10, I got straight A's for the 4th year in a row. My dad gave me a pat on the head. That same year, Ella came home with a D in science, and my parents bought her a cupcake to cheer her up. I sat in the corner and smiled. It would become a pattern. They called me low maintenance. They said I was independent. But what they meant was, you don't matter as much. After the housewarming, I started to see every moment of my life differently through a lens of cruel clarity. Like the time I stayed home from prom to watch Grandma when she had the flu, because my parents wanted a weekend away. Or when I worked overtime for 6 months to help pay off Mom's medical bills and never told a soul. Or when I drove 4 hours at 2 a.m. to pick up Ella after a fight with her boyfriend, only for her to fall asleep while I drove and never thank me. It wasn't that I was unloved. No, I was used. But the thing about being the strong one for too long is that people forget you bleed too. The week after the party, I dropped off groceries at my parents' place like I always did. They didn't even look up from the TV. Ella was there, lounging on the couch, barefoot, talking on speakerphone to a contractor. They were expanding the kitchen already. Just make sure it's quartz, not granite, she told him. I stood there for a minute, holding a bag of oranges I'd bought with my last $20. My mother looked at me and smiled faintly. Thanks, Angie. You're such a help. That's what I was to them. Help. Not a daughter, not a person with her own pain and history and exhaustion. Just the helper? On my way out the door, I paused. I stared at the framed photo on the wall, Ella in a graduation cap, beaming. I remembered being there that day. I'd taken the photo. I'd also paid the last installment of her tuition. And yet, I wasn't in a single picture. I thought about the lottery ticket still tucked inside my purse drawer. I hadn't checked the numbers yet. It had been almost a week. I didn't even care about the money, honestly. Not at the time. I just couldn't bear to look at it. Because I'd bought it for them. With the same hopeful heart I'd carried since childhood, always believing that if I gave just a little more, they'd finally look at me with the same warmth they reserved for my sister. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my cheap apartment, the sound of a leaky faucet keeping me company. I thought about how many times I had swallowed my pride just to keep the peace, how many birthdays I spent alone, how many times I said, "It's okay," when it clearly wasn't. And I thought, what if I stopped being the helper? What if I stopped asking for love and started demanding respect? The next day, I declined Mom's request to drive her to her doctor's appointment. I said I had plans. I didn't. But I needed her to hear the word no from me. She sounded startled. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said, and hung up. Then, heart pounding, I pulled the lottery ticket from the drawer and logged on to the official site. I entered the numbers, hand trembling. Matching numbers. Every single one. At first I thought I misread it. I checked again, and then again. No mistake. I had just won $6.2 million. Silence filled the room like thunder. I sat very still. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't dance. I just sat there breathing long, slow, hollow breaths. Because for the first time in my life, I had something they didn't know about. And this time, I wasn't going to give it away. The next morning, I woke up in a different world. The sun came in through the same cracked blinds, the faucet still leaked in the kitchen, and the hum of my neighbor's lawnmower buzzed through the paper-thin walls. But I was not the same woman who fell asleep the night before, because now I had $6.2 million. I sat on the floor in my pajamas, holding the ticket like it was a newborn baby. Fragile, powerful, dangerous. I'd bought it on a whim, a last-minute errand at the gas station on Highway 64. I almost didn't get it. There was a long line, and I was already running late delivering groceries to my parents. But something told me to grab it anyway. I had a weird little superstition that week, a dream I had of my grandmother whispering in my ear, "Don't give it all away this time." I didn't think it meant anything. Now I wasn't so sure. That lottery ticket was supposed to be in their hands. I'd even written a note, just for fun. Love, Angie. But I pulled it out of the gift bag at the last second, shoved it back in my purse, and smiled through my teeth at the people who thought I would never be more than a second thought. They had no idea, and I wasn't going to tell them. The first thing I did was lock it in a fireproof safe I bought at a pawn shop the next day. Then I called a lawyer when I found 4 counties away so no one local would catch wind and asked, "How do I claim a lottery ticket?" Quietly. Turns out it wasn't easy. Tennessee allows anonymity for winners, but the process was tedious. I had to create a trust, register an LLC, sign a mountain of legal papers. I took a few days off from work, told my boss I had a family emergency, and drove to Nashville in an old hoodie and sunglasses, like I was starring in some cheap spy movie. And still, no one knew. Not my parents, not Ella, not even my best friend Maria. I told no one. Because I knew how quickly love turns to expectation, how kindness becomes currency. I had spent a lifetime being the helper, the reliable one, the safety net. This was the first time in my life I had something that no one could touch. But that didn't mean I wasn't watching. I noticed Ella posting about renovations again. A new chandelier, custom French doors, a dream kitchen with an imported backsplash. I saw my mother comment, "So proud of you, baby," and I felt that old flicker of bitterness. But it didn't burn the same, because now I held something they couldn't take. A month after my win, my father called. His voice was cheerful but tight. "Hey, sweetheart, how's work?" "Busy," I said, stirring cold pasta in my kitchen. "What's up?" "Well, funny story. Ella's second mortgage application got denied. Something about credit ratios, I don't know. Anyway, long story short, she's short on the kitchen expansion funds. And your mother and I were wondering," he didn't say it outright. He never did. But I knew what he meant. I let the silence hang. "Angie, you still there?" "I'm here," I said. "But I don't have anything to give right now." He paused. Just long enough to make the air feel heavy. "Well, that's disappointing. Ella's just under a lot of stress, you know." "I understand," I said. But I didn't offer more. Because they never asked what I needed when I was stressed. They never asked what I had left to give. They just took. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time staring out the window at nothing. They were expecting the old Angela, the one who would dip into her meager savings, the one who would cry in the car afterward, but still show up with a check. But that Angela, she was gone. Instead, I called my attorney and said, "Let's move forward on the private trust. And find me a small property out of state, quiet, remote, nothing flashy." That week I bought a modest lakeside cabin in northern Georgia under the name Larkspur Trust. I paid in full. Then I started planning the life I wanted, not the life I'd been assigned. I didn't quit my job. Not yet. I showed up, smiled, answered phones, took lunch at my desk. I lived like nothing had changed, but inside everything had. I began researching investment accounts, charities I wanted to support. I took an online course on small business accounting. Every night I pored over number strategies, legal loopholes. And every morning I got a little stronger, a little bolder. My parents thought I was still their good little soldier, but I wasn't preparing to beg anymore. I was preparing to walk away, forever, if I had to. I didn't slam doors. I didn't write long, angry letters. I didn't post dramatic call-outs online. My revenge was quiet, elegant, surgical. Because the best kind of revenge isn't loud. It's patient. By the time autumn rolled around, I had turned a portion of my winnings into a registered trust, a diversified portfolio, and the beginnings of a business. Under my new identity as the founder of Larkspur Solutions, I started consulting for small businesses across Georgia and the Carolinas, women-owned, overlooked, underfunded. Every client I took reminded me of who I could have been if I hadn't spent years being drained dry for someone else's dreams. Back in Franklin, my parents still thought I was working overtime just to scrape by. Mom texted me weekly, "Groceries tight this week. Can you drop some off your sister's roof leaking, poor thing? Could you help with the repair fund Ella's been looking down lately? A spa day might cheer her up. Maybe you could book one for her." I used to feel guilt as reflex. Now I felt nothing. Maybe a small flicker of shame. But it passed quickly. because I was done fixing things I didn't break. The deeper I got into my new life, the more I saw how much I had settled before. My apartment, my job, my entire sense of identity had been built on the belief that if I gave enough someone, anyone would finally say, "You matter too." But they never did. So I stopped waiting for them to wake up. And I decided to make them feel what I'd felt, but in reverse. It started small. I pulled back entirely. No grocery runs, no birthday reminders. I skipped Dad's annual fishing trip, the one I always organized. No one else stepped up. It didn't happen. They waited days for my call. It never came. Then I ghosted the family group chat. They messaged me, called a few times. I answered once with a flat, "Busy, sorry." That was it. Weeks passed. Then one day I received a group email from my father titled "A Little Help." Inside was a long explanation about how Ella had maxed out a credit card, doing home improvements she's still learning, he wrote, and how a small loan from me would help ease their joint finances. They'd co-signed on a loan for her new sunroom. Sunroom. I sat in my windowless apartment reading about her sunroom. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat at my real estate agent's office in Georgia the same week and signed closing papers for a second cabin, this one larger, with lakefront access. I didn't tell anyone. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. There was no rage in me now, only purpose. At night I'd open my old photo albums and stare at pictures from birthdays. I spent alone Christmas mornings, where Ella got jewelry and I got candles. It didn't hurt anymore. It just felt distant, like watching someone else's life play out. I thought a lot about how I got here. The truth is, I spent so long being the safety net that I forgot how to be a person. I thought love came with conditions. Be useful, be quiet, be dependable. But real love doesn't require you to erase yourself. So I began writing down everything I'd ever wanted to do but didn't. Open a retreat center for women starting over, learn to play the cello, travel to Iceland, get a massage without guilt, eat at a 5-star restaurant without looking at the price column. I wrote them all down one by one. I didn't know which ones I'd actually do, but just writing them made me feel more alive than I had in years. Then came the day I knew would arrive. My father called. 3 missed calls in a row, then a voicemail. "Hey, sweetheart. We need to talk. Things have gotten complicated. Ella made some poor choices and the bank's getting aggressive. Can we meet?" It was the first time he sounded nervous. Not demanding, not guilt-tripping, just desperate. I stared at the phone. Then I stared at my reflection in the mirror. Same eyes, same tired shoulders. But something had shifted. I no longer looked like a woman begging to be loved. I looked like a woman with options. And for once I didn't feel like going home. Instead, I opened my laptop, checked my business account. My latest invoice had just cleared. I booked a weekend trip to a quiet mountain inn. Just me. No explanations. That night I made a decision. They would see what it felt like to ask and be denied, to need and be forgotten. It happened on a Tuesday. I was having tea on the back porch of my new cabin in Georgia. Sunlight rippling off the lake, the air crisp with the promise of fall, when my phone lit up. 10 missed calls, 5 voicemails, 1 from Ella, 4 from my mother. I didn't check them right away. Instead, I sat with the silence. A peaceful kind of silence, the kind you can only feel when no one expects anything from you. The wind rattled the dry leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker hammered against bark. Then my phone buzzed again. Text from Ella. "They're taking the house. Do something. Please." I read it 3 times. Do something. Not "can you help," not "I'm sorry for how we've treated you." Just do something. I almost laughed. They still thought I was the family fixer, the human bandage, the emotional accountant always ready to write a check to clean up someone else's mess. But the truth was, their problems had been building for months, and I had watched them crumble from afar like a glass tower buckling under its own weight. It started with Ella's impulsive renovations. She wanted her dream kitchen, dream patio, dream closets. My parents so proud of her for finally becoming a homeowner, co-signed every foolish loan. Then she opened a boutique candle business with zero experience hiring influencers and ordering overpriced packaging before selling even a single product. When her Instagram campaign flopped, she panicked, took out another loan. By then, the property value had dipped, and the bank came sniffing around. And now the reckoning had arrived. When I finally listened to my mother's voicemail, her voice was shaky. "Angela, the bank is foreclosing. Ella didn't tell us about the second loan, and now they're saying we might lose everything. We're at the house now. The sheriff just taped a notice to the door. Ella's crying in the driveway. Please, if you can come, we don't know what to do." I closed my eyes. The sheriff? The tape? The scene? I pictured it all. And instead of sorrow, I felt nothing but justice. Because now they knew what it felt like to be helpless. To call someone you discarded and hope they'll show up anyway. I didn't go. I didn't call. That night I turned off my phone and took a walk through the woods. The moon filtered through the trees. I breathed in the air like I hadn't since I was 20, like I was free. Whole. Unowned. The next day I opened my old laptop and pulled up our family photos. There we were. Birthdays, cookouts, holidays. But in every photo I was blurry. Cropped. Or holding something. A cake. A trash bag. A baby. I was always on the edge, never the center. In one, Ella is sitting on my father's lap laughing, and I'm in the background wiping down a table. That was my role. Always the shadow. But not anymore. Later that week, my father called again. I answered. My voice was calm, cool. "Angela," he said, voice thin with exhaustion. "I know we made mistakes, but right now, this is serious." "I'm sure it is," I said. "I hope you find a solution." There was silence. Then the shift. "You're really going to let your family go through this? You'd really sit on your hands while your sister becomes homeless?" I took a slow breath. My tea was steeping. "Let me ask you something, Dad," I said. "The day you gave her that house, did you even think of me?" His breath caught. Well, we just thought you're always okay. You never ask for anything." "Exactly," I said. "And you taught me that meant I didn't deserve anything either." "Angela, I'm not angry anymore," I said softly. "But I'm not your safety net. Not anymore." He started to speak, but I hung up. And this time I didn't feel guilty. Instead, I watched the leaves fall from the maple tree in my front yard one by one. 2 days later, Ella sent a final text. "They're auctioning the house next week. I'm moving in with Mom and Dad. I hope you're happy." I didn't reply. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because I wanted her to think. To sit in the consequences of her entitlement. To finally truly understand what it felt like to be the one left outside the gate. I wasn't being cruel. I was being fair. For the first time in my life, I was choosing me. It was a rainy Sunday morning when they finally came to find me. I was sitting by the fireplace in my Georgia cabin reading a book I hadn't touched in years. The smell of cedar logs curling into the air when I heard the crunch of gravel outside. I glanced through the window, and there they were, my parents. Standing side by side in the cold. My mother's hair was pulled into a limp bun. My father leaned heavily on a cane. And between them, barely visible under a hooded sweatshirt, was Ella, her belly rounded beneath the fabric. She was pregnant. I didn't rush to open the door. I watched them stand there, uncertain, shifting from foot to foot. They didn't knock. Maybe they weren't even sure if it was my house. After all, I'd never told them where I went when I disappeared. I stepped outside, slowly wrapping my shawl tighter around my shoulders. My mother's eyes filled the moment she saw me. "Angela," she said. Her voice cracked like old wood. "You look so..." Well, I said nothing. My father took a step forward, then stopped. "We just wanted to talk." I didn't say, "You wanted to talk when I was useful, when I was your crutch." I didn't scream. Where was this effort when I was living off instant noodles while paying your tax debt? I just nodded. Cool, controlled. "Come in." We sat in silence for a while. I made them tea. My mother's hands trembled as she held the cup. Ella didn't speak. Finally, my father broke the silence. We didn't come to ask for money." I raised an eyebrow. No, he said. "We came to say, we're sorry." The words hung in the air like a test. Sorry for what I asked carefully. My mother wiped her cheek. For choosing her every time. For assuming you'd always be there to carry the burden. For not seeing you until we had nothing left to lean on. Ella finally looked up. Her eyes were bloodshot. I thought you'd always save me, she whispered. And when you didn't, I finally realized how much I took from you. I swallowed hard. My throat felt tight. It wasn't that I hadn't imagined this moment I had. 100 times. But it never looked like this. Not in my dreams. Not with my mother's voice shaking or Ella hunched under shame, or my father crying into a handkerchief like he had nothing left but regret. Still a part of me held back, because I'd seen them perform before, heard their sweet words when they needed something. And now with a baby on the way, no house and no options, maybe this was just another play. How do I know this isn't just about desperation? I asked quietly. My mother shook her head. It is. We are desperate, but not just for shelter. For your forgiveness. Silence again. And then for the first time in decades, I let myself cry. Not out of sadness, but because I realized I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted peace, and that meant letting go. But peace didn't mean returning to the role they'd assigned me. It didn't mean stepping back into the family like nothing happened. No. It meant forgiving them without forfeiting myself again. So I said carefully, I forgive you, but I'm not coming back. My father looked at me confused. What do you mean? I said, voice steady. I'm not your fixer anymore. I'm not your safety net. I'll help, but from a distance. I've built a life for myself, and I won't sacrifice it again. Not even for you. Ella nodded slowly. I understand, she whispered. You don't owe us anything. For once I believed her. I wrote them a check the next day. Enough to get them back on their feet. Quietly, anonymously, I hired an estate attorney to clear their foreclosure and place Ella in a safe apartment for the duration of her pregnancy. I did it not because they deserved it, but because I did. I deserved to be the kind of woman who could show mercy, without being manipulated. They sent a thank you letter 2 weeks later. No requests, no hints, just gratitude. It was the first time they'd ever said thank you without asking for more. Forgiveness is a strange thing. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It arrives quietly like mist over the mountains, soft and barely noticeable, until you realize the weight you've carried for years is suddenly gone. After I sent that check and watched their lives slowly stabilize from a distance, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free. Free from needing recognition. Free from earning love. Free from the lie that my worth depended on how much I gave. They never asked me for anything again. I didn't show up for Ella's baby shower, but I sent a care package. I didn't attend the family reunion, but I mailed a framed photo of the 3 of us as children, one of the rare ones where I was smiling and centered, not holding anyone's coat or cleaning up behind them. I wasn't punishing them anymore. I was just living differently, because for the first time in my life I had a home of my own purchased with my name, my choices, and my quiet strength. I had land beneath my feet that no one could take. I had a business I built from the ground up, not flashy, not famous, but steady and mine. And I had mornings like this, where I could wake up with the sunrise curling through my windows, my body warm under handmade quilts, the silence of peace humming around me like a song. Some days I walked along the lake barefoot, letting the cold mud squeeze between my toes. Other days, I drank coffee on the porch, while scribbling in a notebook full of dreams I'd never dared say aloud before. I made friends, real friends. People who didn't know me as the older sister or the responsible daughter, but simply as Angela. No role to play. No burden to carry. I also started mentoring other women who had been ignored, overlooked, used. I hosted quiet weekend retreats at my cabin. We sat in circles around the fire pit speaking truths we'd buried for decades. We cried. We laughed. We rebuilt. One of the women, a retired nurse named Brenda, said to me once, "It's like you created a life no one can ruin." And maybe I had, because my life was no longer a reaction to other people's chaos. It was a life by design, drawn from the ashes of betrayal, lit by the fire of my own awakening. My parents never became perfect, but they softened. They sent letters sometimes, never asking for anything, just checking in. And slowly I responded, carefully, with love but with boundaries. I forgave them not because they earned it, but because I didn't want to carry their sins in my chest anymore. I released them so I could hold myself. Ella gave birth to a baby girl. She named her Angela. I cried for an hour when I read the card, and still, I didn't return, because love can be real, and still not be enough to go back. I loved them. I wished them well. But my life wasn't behind me. It was here. In the quiet, in the calm, in the sound of the wind brushing pine trees and the soft knock of deer along the trail. I chose a new beginning, and that beginning didn't require applause, or approval, or anyone's permission. It just required me. They gave everything to someone else, but fate gave everything to me. And when I finally chose myself, I won more than any lottery could buy.